Hello and welcome to the Feeling Good podcast. I am your host, Fabrice and I, and joining me here in the Murrieta studios is Dr. David Burns. Hi, David.
Hi, Fabrice.
Dr. David Burns has been a pioneer in the development of cognitive therapy, and he is the creator of the new team therapy. He is the author of Feeling Good, which has sold over 5 million copies in the United States and has been translated into over 20 languages. He is an emeritus adjunct clinical professor of psychiatry at the Stanford University School of Medicine. Welcome to episode 75 of the Feeling Good podcast. We are going to do the second episode in the series on five simple ways to boost your happiness. And we're going to talk about what today, David?
Procrastination. How to,
I thought we were going to talk about procrastination tomorrow.
Oh, okay. There you go. And by the way, they're not all simple ways. We're kind of leading people on, but the first three ways are simple.
Yeah.
Last week's, this week's, and then next week's, which will be on confronting a fear. The last two are pretty fantastic, but they're not really going to be
it's like
simple.
5 simple ways to play Beethoven's sonatas.
There you go. There you go. Right. Now, the general theme of today's podcast, just to boil it down to simple essentials, is that most human beings procrastinate on things that make us anxious and unhappy. I know I do a good bit from time to time. I also use the technique that we'll talk about on today's podcast to overcome procrastination, and I'm going to give a personal example on today's podcast as well. But if you get started on something that you've been putting off, it can have a real mood elevating effect. And so if you want to pursue what we're going to teach you how to do in today's podcast, and by the way, you were saying, Fabrice, we had a previous podcast on procrastination that was kind of aimed at therapists, how therapists can work with patients who procrastinate.
Right.
And today's we're working with the patient, so to speak, and that could be a therapist who procrastinates, but I'm going to show you, the listener, how to overcome your own procrastination. And there's a few general points, and then we're going to go through this really cool thing called the Anti-Procrastination Sheet that I developed years ago, and it can be very helpful. The first thing is to think of something that you've been procrastinating on, that's been kind of bugging you, and it could be anything, and like it could be your taxes, filing your papers on your desk.
By the way, for people who might wonder, episode 53 was the one on procrastination for therapists.
Oh, okay, cool. So people, maybe we'll link back to that one too if people want to hear that podcast as well. It could be cleaning your garage, doing yard work, reading something you have to read for school or work, preparing a paper or a presentation. It could be anything at all. And the thing that I'm going to focus on when I give my own personal example is something that I have to do every year that I just hate doing, which is preparing lists of expenses for
all the receipts and
for
stuff.
Our accountant. And that's quite a job, and I tend to put it off, and then I get guilty, and it's like carrying this heavy weight around. What do you procrastinate on things?
No.
Tell us what you procrastinate on.
Well, actually, the taxes are a good one. I tend to turn them into my accountant the day after they needed them.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Which is not bad, sometimes it's weeks.
That's right. That's right. So I'm going to give you a few general principles on overcoming procrastination, and then I'm going to show you exactly how to do it. I'm pretty excited about today's broadcast. The first think of something specific that you've been putting off. You can't solve procrastination on some vague level, and that's one principle of all of our podcasts. Human change, enlightenment, whatever you want to call it, a lift in your mood can only happen at one specific moment, working on one specific problem or issue. So
you can't solve that forever.
Exactly. So we're going to have less than grandiose goals, but still pretty exciting stuff, I think. So once you've thought of something specific that you've been putting off, and then ask yourself, if you'd like some help with that problem, and if you'd like to get started on it, start to overcome your procrastination.
And that's an important question. This is the agenda setting for oneself.
Absolutely. And you may not, and we'll come to get this again at the end of the podcast. There's a lot of tremendous, good reasons to procrastinate. It makes you anxious. You've got better things to do, more important things. It doesn't have to be done today, et cetera, and et cetera. And so if you feel like you'd like to solve the problem today, then we've got a deal. Listen to the rest of the podcast. If you'd like to solve it tomorrow or later in the week, I suggest you turn off the podcast, because I can't help you solve the problem tomorrow or later in the week. I can only help you if you want to solve it today.
Yeah.
And the next thing is that a lot of people get confused because they're waiting for motivation, and they think motivation comes before productive action. First you're motivated, and then you get productive. And this is something I wrote about in my first book, Feeling Good, really 40 years ago, but people still tell me almost daily how helpful this idea has been to them, that people who are productive realize that motivation does not precede productive action. Action comes first, and then motivation comes later on once you get started on the task. If you wait for motivation, like to clean your garage, for years junk accumulated in our garage, and I've mentioned this on earlier podcasts, and there were rats in there, and there was rat poop all over stuff, and some places the junk was like actually several feet high. And then to think you're going to get motivated to go out in the garage and start interacting with all that junk is absurdity. You're not going to feel like motivated to do the thing you've been putting off. You're not entitled to motivation. And so if you're willing to get started on that task today, even though you're not motivated, then we've got a deal. But if you wait for motivation, you're going to be waiting forever.
Although some people may have motivation to do things like this, could be interesting to see how they get this motivation, but
Yeah, absolutely. And then the last thing is that I'm going to ask you to work on the task that you're putting off for 5 minutes only. And then you're 100% completed with your assignment for today. Now, again, many procrastinators croak when I tell them that, or choke, or get upset and say, oh, no, the task is so big, 5 minutes is a drop in the bucket. I need to spend several hours on my taxes or my paper for school or for work or my dissertation or whatever it is. But the problem here is that if you tell yourself you're going to work for hours and hours, that's like telling yourself you're going to climb Mount Everest. And it'll seem so overwhelming to you that the odds are great that you won't get started. But if you tell yourself, I only have to work for 5 minutes, or even 3 minutes, that's something that you're far more likely to do. And then what I find personally is that if I get started on something, I force myself to get started on something for just a few minutes. Once I get into it, I generally discover that the task is not nearly as hard as I thought and not nearly as anxiety-provoking, and then I start getting motivated, so you may end up doing more than that 5 minutes. But you have to make an agreement with Fabrice and me right now that you'll work on it for 5 minutes no matter what, even if you're not motivated, and then at the end of the 5 minutes you've done 100% you've completed your assignment. Now, before we dive in, any further comments or?
Well, so yes, I mean, I'm sure that some people will have some comments about this. So, let's say they do the assignment, they do their 5 minutes. What did that do for them? I mean, 5 minutes, as you've mentioned, it could be a drop in the bucket depending on the size of the task.
Well, people are different in today's podcast. Any technique we do isn't going to help everybody if that's what you're driving at. I just can speak for my own experience and hundreds of people I've worked with in my clinical work who wanted help with procrastination, that if you just get started on something, you've kind of broken the ice. You begin to see, gosh, this thing isn't so hard. I'm going to show you how to break tasks down into little tiny steps. We call this little steps for big feats. Mm-hmm. That just to do 15 seconds at a time or one minute at a time. And then you begin your mood will often begin to lift, and you begin to feel more motivated to do that task. If you don't, well, then you may have to, continue working on the task without being motivated, or give up on the task. That's up to you. Right. But I'm just saying, for most people, this will be helpful. I don't know if that addresses your question.
Yeah. So, just to rephrase what you're saying, in essence, once they complete the assignment, then the expectation is that they'll feel perfectly okay continuing on the task.
Yes, but always whenever you sit down to do it, to just give yourself the assignment to do little tiny steps, the way I'm going to show right now. And I really originally got this idea from my running, from my jogging. It occurred to me when I'm jogging, I still run. I don't go the distances I used to, but I still try to run, 4 or 5 times a day, and then we do the Sunday hikes. But I used to run, 6-8 miles, something like that. And I would find that when I started running, if I told myself, oh my gosh, I've got 6 miles to go, and there's that long hill at the 4 miles in, I would feel overwhelmed, feel like I wanted to stop.
Yeah.
But if I told myself, oh, could I just get from here to that telephone pole that's about 20 feet away? And I would say, oh, well, that's not a big deal. And then when I get there, I'd say, well, can I get to this next spot? And this is exactly the same thing, to do things in little chunks. In fact, if you take a look, I've put a lot of PDFs in the show notes, and you can download the first one and kind of do this exercise, but then I'll show you how I did it myself. You'll find something called the Anti-Procrastination Sheet, and it's 5 columns, but it's quite different from the pleasure predicting sheet that we went over last week. And the first column is called task. The second is called predicted difficulty, 0 to 100%. Third column is predicted satisfaction, 0 to 100%. The fourth column is actual difficulty, 0 to 100%, and actual satisfaction is 0 to 100%. Now, the first thing you do is you think about the task you have to do, and you decide to break it, and you break it down into little tiny steps that you list in that first column. If you look at the next handout, the next download, the next PDF link, actually, in the show notes, you'll see how I started outlining my own task on the Anti-Procrastination Sheet. Now, once again, the key to doing this is break the task down into little steps that can be done in maybe 15 seconds or 1 minute, something
so what
very
we
tiny.
Get specific, since that's our main thing. What is the task we're talking about?
Okay, in this case, I have to do my annual preparation of all of the receipts, the business expenses, the professional entertainment, mailing expenses, all that has to be documented and listed for our meeting with our tax accountant. And so the first step that I put in doing this would be to turn on the computer. And then that's a real, simple, quick thing. It's a way to get started easily. And then the second thing is to find my expense files on the computer for 2016, because I kind of list everything in Microsoft Word tables.
Okay.
And so I had to find the ones that I did last year. And again, that should be pretty quick. I just look them up in the expenses file.
Okay, so you know where they are.
I know where they are.
Okay.
And I go to 2016, and there they all are, about 10 or 15 of them in different categories. And then the next step was update the file names to 2017 and move them into a new file called 2017.
Okay, so far so good.
And then the fourth step was to begin entering the mailing costs. I have a file folder in my drawer and every time I go to the post office to mail a toolkit, I just put the receipt in there. So I've got about maybe a quarter inch of receipts.
So like several dozens.
Yeah.
So that's going to be much longer than 1 minute.
No, because I said begin entering the costs.
Okay.
Which you can do in about 1 minute. So you just get
So you just need to enter one cost and then you've begun, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Right.
So you make it super easy for yourself. And then the step 5 was finish the mailing costs, entering them. So,
But to finish it, you have to do all the dozens of ones in between the begin and the finish.
Yeah, which is about 10 minutes, something like that.
Okay, so is that part of the small tasks in there?
Yes, but my hope was that by doing these 4 ultra ridiculously easy things, then I'd be kind of on a roll and I could, finish it or continue working on the mailing costs.
Okay.
So the idea is to get into the process rather than to complete it or do something heroic. Now, the next thing you do...
There's a researcher in Canada, Tim Pitchell, who studies procrastination, and his motto is just get started.
Oh, yeah. This is exactly the same thing. Yeah, absolutely. And I would add to that and make certain you don't try to do more than just getting started. Because if you try to do more, if you say get started on a huge assignment, you're not going to get started. If you say get started, sit down and turn on the computer, well, I have to do that every day anyway.
So you shouldn't try to do more than that.
No, you should make a contract with yourself. I'm just going to do, a few minutes on this task. Now, the next thing you do, there's a column called predicted difficulty and predicted satisfaction. And so for number 1, turning on the computer, I predicted 0 difficulty because it should be easy, but only 5% satisfaction because it's not that huge an accomplishment to turn your computer on.
And then you find out that the computer just wouldn't turn on and turns into a very difficult task.
Yes, I had that. I was in computer hell about 1.5 years ago. I bought a new Dell computer and it crashed, and I had so many helpline calls. Finally, they replaced it, and now I've got a computer that works great. And then if you look at the next download or the next link there, you can see how I completed my predictions for the next 4 steps. Finding the expense files for 2016, I predicted 10% difficulty, which is not hardly difficult, but I thought I might have to, remember where they're filed on the computer. And again, only 5% satisfaction. Updating the file names to 2017, I thought that might be 10% difficult, but maybe 20% satisfying on a 0 to 100. So I didn't think any of this would be, wildly exciting.
Sure.
But not overwhelmingly difficult either. And then began entering the mailing costs, just getting a few things listed there. I put 5% difficult because I've done it every year. It's never been hard. And maybe 25% satisfying, and then continuing or completing just that first category, mailing expenses, I thought would be 25% difficult because that might take 10 minutes or so, and maybe 25% satisfying.
Okay.
So then if you look at the next link on the website, how do these things come out? So after I did each step, then I recorded the actual difficulty and actual satisfaction. And so I had predicted 0% difficult and 5% satisfying for turning on the computer, and it was 0% difficult, but 10% satisfying. It wasn't wildly satisfying, but it was twice as satisfying as what I thought.
Jim, I'm glad you're getting some pleasure from turning on your computer.
I can be satisfied as I get older and older with very small things, but believe me, my standards have kind of fallen, and life is a lot easier now because I'm happy with small things. And then if you go to the next download, the next link there, you can see the rest of my steps here. The finding the expense files was 0% difficult and 15% satisfying. I had predicted 5, so again, it was a little bit more. And then updating the file names, that was like 35% satisfying, and beginning to enter the mailing cost was 35%. And then I did manage to, got on a roll and finished them, that was only 15% difficult to finish them and 50% difficult.
Now, I understand the breaking down into small steps. Why do this prediction thing?
Oh, okay. Well, that's a good point, because this is a cognitive therapy thing. See, one of the things that I've talked about quite a bit in depression and anxiety is that the thoughts that upset us, see, the task you've been putting off cannot upset you. It's only your thoughts about the task. And those thoughts will nearly always be distorted, even though you think they're realistic. And one of the distortions is, oh, this task is going to be so hard and so miserable to be doing it. And so you can actually predict how difficult or uncomfortable it's going to be, and then find out how it turns out to be. And often you find out that things are far less difficult than you thought, and often more rewarding, more satisfying than you had anticipated. So it's just a way of kind of demonstrating to yourself that it's these distorted thoughts that are actually. But in your case here,
you did not predict very much difficulty. So why was that an obstacle?
Well, that's the whole idea of the Anti-Procrastination Sheet, to break things down into tiny little easy steps, rather than saying, oh, I've got to get this all done today. If I had made that prediction, I would have predicted like 90% difficulty.
Okay.
And I never would have gotten into it. In fact, that's the mistake that I was making for several weeks. I knew I had to get going on this task, but I kept thinking, oh, there's so much to do. There's all those file folders and blah, blah, blah. And then in addition, there were other aspects of it that were freaking me out, that I was going to have to download our visa expenses from online. And every year that's been real hard for me. And I have to end up calling the help people because it's confusing how to do it.
Oh, that's really painful.
Well, that's the way you get to thinking. But at any rate, to make a long story short, once I got to here, then I didn't even need to continue with the Anti-Procrastination Sheet, because I was thinking, hey, this isn't that hard. I could do another step or two right now. And so the first time I actually ended up working on for about an hour and a half. And then I felt really terrific, and I was about maybe a third of the way through the task. And the next couple days, I continued to chip away at it, and by the third day, I was entirely done. And I showed my wife, here's all the expenses and everything. I'm all ready for the accountant meeting with the accountant. When is it? And she said, oh, it's 5 weeks from now. She says, you're way ahead of me. Mm-hmm. Usually she's the organized one, and so I felt really really terrific about it. And so that's kind of how it works. And for me, it's been a little secret that I use all the time. Now, I've been telling people I have this new book I'm working on, Feeling Great, but in the fall, I had so many presentations. I had 15 presentations to give, and that I had to prepare for conferences.
Yeah.
And it was just overwhelming, so I had to set the book aside, and I got kind of out of that mind space. Do you know what I mean?
Was it overwhelming, or were you overwhelming yourself?
Exactly. Well, I was overwhelming myself, but it was, in fact, there was preparing 15 different PowerPoint presentations and 15 different handouts for 15 different audiences is, in fact, a tremendous amount of work. And so I put the book off, and then people were saying, like, Pat, one of our fans, said, when are you going to send me sample chapters so I can, see how you're doing on your book? And people have been writing, when's your book coming out? So I thought, well, I got to get back to it. So again, I did the same thing. Just, could I find the last chapter I was working on in the computer? And then, could I just maybe print it? I have to go and get my car fixed, my Toyota, and I could just print it. And when I'm waiting for the car there, I could do some editing.
Yeah, fill that time.
Yeah, so again, it was, that's right. So just little steps. And then yesterday I got all fired up again, and I got one of the chapters. It was on a section in there. Do you have a self? Do you need a self? And it's the whole idea of this section. I have a section on how so many of us feel like we're not good enough. And even I've felt that intensely sometimes. And the suffering, when we think we have a self that's flawed or defective or inferior, and we start thinking that we're not good enough. And I'm thrilled with this theme because it's in so many people who are depressed and anxious. All the therapists in our group feel that way. Mm-hmm. And I just, finally I got into it, and I just was just thrilled. We're working on the new book, and then in the middle of the night I woke up with new ideas for this section, how to finish the section and how to write different parts. I started getting all fired up again. But again, the thing was just to give myself a little tiny steps, just a few little things to do. And I do this all day long. It's almost the way I lead my life right now, is just say, well, I'll just do a minute or two on this task, and then I get sucked in. So that's it. Now, one thing I wanted to ask you, Fabrice, and you may have some cool comments and questions too, but there may be listeners right now who are thinking, I don't feel like doing that anti-procrastination sheet.
Yeah, that's catch-22.
Yeah, that's too hard for me. What would we say to them? I have an answer, but I want to pick your brain first.
My answer is no. Maybe it is true. It is just too hard, and maybe that's not the right technique for them.
Exactly. And in fact, I could ask those listeners, list right now all the reasons not to use the strategies that we've talked about today, to print out that anti-procrastination sheet, to break the task down, to get started on it today. Maybe we can brainstorm today. And these are the really good reasons not to do this at this time. What are they?
I don't know how to turn on my computer.
That's probably not one. But like people might be thinking like, number one, tomorrow will be a better day, right?
That's a possibility. Yeah.
So we can write that one down.
I didn't get a good night's sleep.
Yeah, I need more sleep. Tomorrow will be a better day. And in fact, if you're really a procrastinator, you don't even have to write these down. We'll do it for you.
Right.
Okay. And then...
we could have a list that's pre-made, and they can just check the box.
Yeah, or just look at it.
Look at it, yeah.
Checking the box might be too much.
Mentally check the box.
Yes, there you go. And then I have better things to do.
Yeah.
I have more important things to do right now, right?
Yeah. Or more fun.
Well, that's a fourth. No,
I have more fun things to
I
do.
have more fun things to do. How about another one? It will be too hard.
Yeah, it's beyond my capacity to do all this stuff.
Yeah. What are some other good reasons we give ourselves for procrastinating?
It's going to take too much of my time.
Oh, yeah, take too much time. Okay, another one. I'm not in the mood.
Yeah, not in the mood, not motivated.
I don't feel like it.
Yeah, I don't feel like it. Yeah, the usual.
What are some more? We've got 7 here. Tomorrow will be a better day. I need more something. What was it? I need more sleep. Oh, yeah.
More sleep, yeah.
I have more important things to do. I have more fun things to do. It's too hard. I'm not. Oh, it will be unpleasant and difficult.
Yeah, it will. It's not going to be fun.
Yeah, no fun.
No fun.
And so you can add other reasons as well. And then once we've got all the good reasons to keep procrastinating, then what's our message to the listeners?
Well, the message is, maybe those are good enough reasons not to do it, and they really need to make a choice.
Exactly. I give you 200% agreement on that, and if you want to keep procrastinating, as the Buddha said 2,500 years ago, go for it.
No idea.
Yeah, go for it. So anyway, that's today's podcast on a very common problem. I hope a few of you got fired up and will try this technique, because it's been very effective for me, and give it a try. You might find that it solves some problems for you.
And we spent 30 minutes describing it, but it's essentially fairly simple.
Yeah, something you can do in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
In fact, you can get started on it in 1 minute.
Yeah. Well, I hope we get some feedback from people who tried it, and we are waiting for questions.
Absolutely. And by the way, just as one last thing, we're still getting tons of questions from the podcasts, and we're getting a lot of listeners now. You were saying we're up to over, this month we're going to again have 40,000 downloads.
Yeah, we're hitting the 40,000 download mark. Yeah.
And we're getting a lot of fans from all over the world, and we so much appreciate the support of each of you. Many have been writing in questions that we'll address again another Ask David on the 5 secrets of effective communication. And one thing we want to remind you to do is, if you tried the 5 secrets and it didn't work out for you, and that's to be expected, because the 5 secrets, it's like learning to play a musical instrument. So at first, it won't sound very good when you try to play the guitar or the piano and you're just barely learning. Send us what the other person said to you, your boss, your wife, your husband, whoever the person was, and exactly what you said next. Yeah. And some people are writing and say, well, my husband says things like this, and then I say things like that, or my daughter says things like this, and then I say things like that. But they don't tell us what the other person said and what you said next.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what we need. And then we can comment, we can show you why your response was not effective, and we can model how to do it more effective. And maybe we can even see if we can get Helen back.
And it has to be something that happened to the listener themselves.
Yeah. Yes.
Not talking about somebody else.
Exactly. Some interaction that you had with your boss, your wife, whoever, and you want help to see what you could have done differently to have handled the thing more effectively.
Yeah, so those are specific queries that we're most likely to answer on the air.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, we'll see what we get.
Okay.
Thanks, David.
Thanks, Fabrice.
This has been another episode of the Feeling Good podcast. For more information, visit Dr. Burns' website at feelinggood.com, where you will find the show notes for this podcast under the blog page, and where you can leave your comments and questions. The website has an abundance of resources for therapists as well as non-therapists, including books, workshops, a list of online training groups around the world, and much more. Theme music is Gypsy Jazz in Paris, 1935, composed and performed by Brett Van Donsel. I am your host, Fabrice and I invite you to join us next time for another episode of the Feeling Good podcast.